We should do that for fun. Okay, welcome back to this week's YAWA. We have special guests with us, Whitney and Josh with Riverstone Kennels. You've seen a lot of stuff that we've posted about Sprig. That is where he came from. These guys are the masterminds behind that breeding.
Yes.
You could say that.
Attempted.
Yeah.
Well, it was his 1-year birthday today, so it was very fitting that he got to come back up to you guys. And you guys actually have another breeding on the ground right now, don't you? Of the exact same pairing.
We do. We're so excited.
Yeah.
Well, what's really exciting about that is that breeding and that pairing was not only one that we really anticipated because those are just two really special dogs, but what those puppies displayed over this first year between how natural their mouth was, how composed and controlled they were, how trainable they were, and then on top of that all, their personality and family orientation, it's panned out to be everything that we were hoping it would be. And so to have that repeat breeding is something we're super excited about.
And I definitely know people love following along with Sprig's series, and they were sad to see him go, and they're like, oh, there's not going to be any more videos of Sprig, and we're like, no, not right now, but they do get to look forward to one last really awesome video that we got to shoot today with Sprig and his daddy, so it'll be a pretty cool video coming out, so you'll have to watch for that.
That's right.
Awesome. So we are back to answer questions. We got, again, another overwhelming number of questions. So we're going to get to as many of them as we can. But we appreciate you all for asking. If this is your first time to the channel, guys, hit that subscribe button down below and turn on notifications so you don't miss anything else that we post in the future. Kat, get started.
We're going to get it started off on a really good question, especially because Josh and Whitney, like we said, have Riverstone Kennels, and then Ethan and I have Standing Stone Kennels, so kind of interesting names. And the question is from Remy.dy from Instagram. How did you decide on a kennel name? What was the process and significance of what you chose?
That is a good one.
Yeah, so I actually love this question. We don't get it asked a ton.
We don't either, so.
Yeah, so I'm really interested to hear what you guys have to say about
and I'm
this.
interested to hear what you guys have to say.
Okay, so Riverstone Kennels. When we started Riverstone Kennels, it was something that I really wanted the name to have a meaning, and I had friends that would incorporate their name to it, right? And so Miller Kennels wasn't really something that tripped my trigger, and I wanted there to be an impact, and so it took quite a while, and I really reflected a lot on what I wanted that name, to really signify as far as our company goes. And what I kind of fell on is that, where I am in my career right now, I think has a lot to do with where I came from. Right. And so I wanted to kind of combine the past of what brought us here with the present and where we are. And so, River, came from the St. Croix River Valley, which is where we currently live.
Absolutely.
And obviously that's a big piece of, what we are and who we are. And Stone actually came from, it's a tiny town called Stone Lake, Wisconsin. And that's where my grandpa had a cabin. And that's where my passion for the outdoors really blossomed, So I shot my first deer up there, my first duck, my first goose, my first grouse, caught my first muskie. It was like everything that drew me to the outdoors started in Stone Lake. And so that's why, River and Stone made so much sense to me. And that's how we came up with the name.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a really good story. And we should have gone first, because our story is
It's drastically more business-oriented, drastically less personal-oriented.
And sentimental, so...
Yeah. If I could reach the button, I would hit it. We actually started thinking of kennel names, and then Google searched them to see if they existed.
We definitely wanted it to be original and to be standalone, stand out, so that people, when they heard of Standing Stone Kennels, it wasn't confused with every other Standing Stone Kennels that was out there.
Yep.
Which there's a lot of other names that you can probably think of that are very common, whether it's in the lab world or the short hair world or just any dog
or just
kennel.
Dog breeders in general.
Yep.
I think there's a million wild rose kennels.
And
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's-
wild rose is a very common name, not just in labs, but in short hairs as well, in any breed, I think.
Mhm.
So we wanted originality for sure. And
Then we tried to stick with something that kind of had like you could say, yeah, that kind of has a feel of dogs. So Standing Stone, like on point, staunch, whatever. But ultimately it came down to, we thought of some names, went, that kind of sounds cool. Then Google searched them to see if they existed.
yeah.
There you go.
And it
It
worked
worked.
out. It worked, right? So it's interesting to see how we both came about coming up with the names, and it still worked
Right.
for both of us. So
All right, for all of you guys that always want to know what we have in the cup, it is bourbon this evening, and it is Jefferson's Ocean Aged at Sea, Voyage 19. That's all there is to it.
I don't like bourbon, so I'm having a Corona Refresca. It's refreshing.
And I'm pregnant, so I'm drinking water.
Very practical, very practical.
Perfect. Next question.
Next question. This is a good one from Matthias Mays, 1991, on Instagram. I've rewatched the puppy training videos of Sprig, as our new pup is coming in 2 weeks at 8 weeks old. So in 2 weeks, they're getting their 8-week-old puppy. Awesome. Congratulations. Each video seems as a one topic per training session. Will you not start another topic before the first is as good as possible, or will you do 3 sessions a day with each time a different topic? So I thought this was a good question because maybe in our video series, it wasn't super clear on exactly how that training progression went. And every video is a different training session, and those are done at different times. So it's not like we're doing session 1 of the day on teaching a puppy to sit, and session 2 of a day teaching a puppy to kennel, and session 3 of the day teaching recall. We're working on each thing until the dog shows a proficiency of that behavior before we're moving on, so that we don't confuse them and we don't add confusion to the training.
Yep. So we personally try to have a good understanding of one thing, then we move on to something else, and then we have good understandings of multiple things, then we start to incorporate them together. Do you guys see in your training you do anything different, or is it similar?
I think, we'd echo exactly what you're saying as far as, it's more about going at the dog's pace and perfecting step 1 before you go to step 2. I really like kind of the analogy crawl, walk, run, because I think
Sure.
too often people want to go from step 1, but they really want to get to step 9, and they really rush everything to get to that point, and it'll never be as solid at step 9 if you don't go through 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 at the right pace.
Yeah. For like a very fresh in my mind example would be, today was the first day that Sprig ever ran doubles, ever. But we put all of the steps in there, a lot of crawling, because we've talked about that, but a lot of crawling happened. And then we started walking a little bit when I was like on the phone with Josh. I'm like, hey, bro, what do we do next here? He's like, try this. I'm like, okay, we'll go do that for a little bit. But then we show up today and he says, all right, this is what I'd be doing with a young dog. And Sprig just came out and nailed it. So being able to have those things in place make a huge difference.
I would definitely agree. And once we get a really good understanding of each of those behaviors, you can incorporate them all into the same training session as well. So once you've got a puppy that can recall, a puppy that can sit, a puppy that can kennel, you can do all of those behaviors in the same session and ask for that behavior, and then only reward when the behavior you've asked for has been exhibited. I think that
It's
adds
very
a lot of
important for
confusion.
differentiation of the cue and the behavior.
Yes, definitely. So
Great question.
great question. Next question from Instagram, Marshall Joe 123. Is there such a thing as too much socialization? I bring my 6-month GSP to the dog park at my apartment every day, and he plays with every dog. He's good at matching energy levels, but I'm wondering if this could lead to bad habits when hunting with other dogs.
So we are definitely not going to hoard all of the questions. We brought you guys, you so graciously joined us here and we want opinions of different people so that everybody's not just hearing what we got to say. What is your opinion on too much socialization?
You go.
Okay. So socialization right now in the world we live in is a really interesting topic because where we find ourselves, or I mean, we're avoiding any kind of socialization of any kind, right? Whether that's people or stores or activities. And so specifically, we have litters of puppies that are going to be going home. And this is a serious topic of concern, because the last thing that we want is to put these puppies in these homes and, heaven forbid this lasts another year. Do we really want the first year of that dog's life to be just socially distanced? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And so, so I think we do have to think about that, just given the time. But as far as it regards to too much socialization, too much of anything in the wrong light or in the wrong situation is obviously a negative thing. So if your socialization is in an uncontrolled environment, or you're seeing habits come out of that, I mean, that's certainly going to have a negative impact on whether it's your home life, your training, behavioral issues, and so on. And so I certainly think that there can be too much socialization, but in a very controlled situation with very positive things going on, the more the better.
Absolutely.
I 100% agree. And I was going to say, anything that your dog's doing consistently, they're conditioning themselves to. So if those are good things and good behaviors that go along with socialization, that's awesome. That's great. That's going to make your dog that much more mentally stable, that much more well-rounded, ready for harder training topics. But if those are not necessarily good behaviors that they're conditioning themselves to, you are going to potentially run into issues with how the dogs interact with other dogs when they're in a hunting environment, or just any other behaviors that are not wanted on a regular basis. So very true. Next question from Instagram. How do you handle a situation where a dog knows a cue well, kennel or hear, but occasionally doesn't listen? 8-month-old GSP is collar conditioned with vibrate, and we're working on getting him used to stimulation. He tends to freeze even with low levels of stim, so we're building him up carefully. Yep. It's from Andrew_Heine.
Andrew Heine. Awesome question. So I'm going to start with this one, and then I definitely want to hear an opinion on if you see differently. The biggest thing is, and this may be a more short hair based thing. I mean, you could say specialized in short hairs, and that's not 100% by design, but definitely the fact that we breed and have that program. That's primarily what comes back in. We get a lot of our dogs, and then people see that, and then that kind of continues to feed that people are like, oh, they're short hair people. So we work with a lot of short hairs, and I would say that I've worked with a lot that continuous stimulation causes a freezing behavior. And I don't know if that's for all dogs, but definitely with a lot of dogs, I see that continuous stimulation causes a freezing behavior. So we use vibrate in our training and teach them to respond to that as a continuous based form of negative reinforcement. And then as they get good with that in controlled situations, and we move to those uncontrolled situations like what you're talking about, where there's a higher level of distraction, we'll use momentary or nicks on stimulation just to redirect focus. So it's like a tap, and it says, hey, and then we go back to what they know. Yeah. Hi. Hi. So, and that tap gets you poke a little harder if they don't pay attention.
Watch
but it's draw. Well, remember, those weren't real words. So, as we work through that, though, we find whatever's going to pull their focus back to us, and then we switch back to something new. Because that's all it takes. I mean, if you already show an understanding to know that, all you need to do is redirect that focus, pull them back to you, and then they're going to comply with everything you know.
I'd say for us, it might be a little different.
Sure.
The way that we work our retrievers, I think, is a lot of, so anytime that we're using simulation, we're trying to mimic a leash. We do so much on lead work.
Awesome.
And the smoothest transition that we have found is try to replicate the lead the best that we can with the e-collar. And so when we ask a dog to sit, if we hold up pressure on that lead, we have pressure on that lead until they sit down, right? Then that pressure comes off. Sit is obviously a big one for us where, not sure what you guys do, but for our pointy dogs, we don't teach sit, at least not until after we have that wool really solidified and down.
We typically don't collar condition our sits until we've gotten our woe really well reinforced. I will teach sit through positive reinforcement, but I'm not going to reinforce it with negative reinforcement with the collar until we've gotten a really
Which goes into the
strong
too much of
understanding.
anything isn't always necessarily a good thing. So
I don't want to create sit to be the default in my pointing
So we're
dogs,
trying
but
to
they
avoid.
can understand what that behavior is, I guess.
Right.
So you're basically you're coming around to you're going to have collar pressure on with like a continuous stimulation, the same as you would the leash pressure, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And so, same for, like a come, if we were to reel them in on a check cord,
Sure.
we would keep on that pressure until they came to us. But there's certain situations that, with a lead, we would give a bump, and then that's where we would give that momentary.
Bump.
And so for what we have going on, we're trying to mimic the lead the best we can.
Cool. Very cool.
And I think something else that can be mentioned with this whole conversation of transitioning from vibrate to types of stimulation, whether that's momentary or continuous stimulation, that there's always a proofing process that needs to happen, because most of the time these puppies, these dogs are going to respond really well in a very controlled environment to vibrate, and that's all that they're going to need, or tone, or whatever your collar has as that really mild type of stimulation. And then what happens is your puppy gets overamped and super excited about something, and their adrenaline kicks in, and then they can't focus on that, just vibrate. Well, if that's the first time that you introduce that momentary or continuous stimulation on a higher level, you're not going to get the desired response either, because your dog's going to be like, whoa, wait, what was that? Whereas if you can do that and proof that collar in those situations, you're going to be able to let your dog know that, hey, you can turn the collar off with these levels and the collar being used this way, the same way that you did with the vibrate. So
Perfect. Are there any other parts of that question we missed?
nope. I
Awesome.
think that was it.
Awesome. I think we've got time for one more, and then we're going to go ahead and go to the break.
Okay. So this one would be a good one for the last question then, from Nundub28 on Instagram.
Nundub.
Hey guys, I have a year-old GSP and have been trying to transition away from treat training with no luck. Would love to hear your process on transitioning away from treats.
That isn't a real quick question at the end here.
I didn't say a real quick question. I said a real good question to end on.
Okay.
See
Okay.
what I did there?
All right. So balls in your court.
Balls in my court?
No, down on the other end. We started the
We're
last one.
talking GSPs now.
Right.
We're talking
gonna-
dogs.
We're at, yeah. Still, though, like treat training with your dogs at a year.
First of all, whoa. We're making assumptions here. Do you utilize treats in the beginning stage of your training at all?
Only for very young puppies.
Very young.
puppies.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm
then you
talking
move
like
into
8, 9, 10 weeks old.
Sure. Then you move from that to leash training,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then from leash training to collar conditioning.
Correct.
Yep.
Perfect.
Yep. Correct.
Okay. So
And a big reason for that is that, we specifically with the retrievers, and specifically our retrievers, we're breeding in, and a lot of Labradors in general have such a strong desire to please
Mhm.
that, the treats are really, although it can be a big motivator to get them going, it's not something that that we like to, nor do we feel like we need to lean on.
sure.
And so, specifically when we get into retrieving work, in itself, that retrieve is the reward, right? Or that praise, especially Labradors. I mean, they just soak up that praise. That praise is reward in itself. And so, what we have found is that if you lean too much or too long on treats, it can cause some issues for us down the road.
where they don't
Yeah.
necessarily appreciate the other rewards that you're going to be offering them, which would be your retrieves and your praise.
Correct.
Because it
Yeah.
might, in some dogs, might not be the same value as what that treat would be, and then they're expecting that.
Exactly. Yep.
That's awesome.
But
So
still, your transition process could be also looked at similarly to a short hair or any breed of, you start your basic obedience and training with that positive reinforcement that's a treat, and then that transitions to other forms of positive reinforcement, as well as your leash training and your collar conditioning. So that would be where we would say is you need to make that transition, which it may be a little bit more difficult now at a year old of your puppy or your dog at this point is so focused on that food reward and the treats, and that's all that they want to work for, that you can teach an older dog new tricks. He's not that old. He's only a year, but he's been conditioned for the last, 10 months of his life that that's what he has to look forward to. That's the response. And so we need to let him understand that there's other ways to comply with our cues than just receiving a treat when he wants to do the behavior.
So, and with our typical short hairs, we're going to have not 100% opposite, but a lot of the opposite end of the spectrum in the sense that, we breed a little more for independence because their main goal is to be out there working as opposed to be in here handling. And we move from that positive reinforcement via food rewards to collar conditioning relatively quickly. Usually somewhere between 4 and 6 months, depending on the dog, kind of depending on how much focus and cooperation they have, will change that. And if you watch our series, so if you go to standingstonekennels.com/links, you can actually click on Rogue series, Quest series, and then Sprig series is on there as well. And you'll see, even though they're going through our training program, the progression is different, and that's
the order
based
in
off
which we do some of the training goals is different.
Yep, and that's all based off of their personality. So try and find which personality best matches, and it's going to help you to see that progression and how we moved, and what happened in
and
that
how we
situation.
got away from just using treats in our training, and how that looked. So.
Perfect. Thanks, guys, for the questions. We're going to take a short break here, and then we will be back with part 2.